I've always had a strange fascination with mirrors. Not just the way they reflect our image back to us, but the idea they might hold some supernatural power. Since my younger days, I believed that mirrors could be a portal to another dimension, a place where the unknown and the terrifying resides. But I never thought that my obsession would lead me down a path of true horror. It all started when I found an old ornate mirror at a garage sale. I couldn't resist its intricate design and the fact it seemed to call out to me. I brought it home and hung it in my living room. At first, everything seemed normal, but as the days went on, I started to notice things on the reflective surface that shouldn't be there. The first time it happened, I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror out of the corner of my eye. When I turned to look at it directly, it disappeared before I could properly register what I was seeing. I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But soon the visions in the reflection became more frequent and more detailed. Each time I had the mirror in my peripheral view, I saw something twisted in the glass, only for it to disappear when I turned towards it. But the imagery was already burned into my mind. It was a grotesque face, staring at me with sinister intent. The eyes were black pits, and the mouth was a gaping maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. The skin was grey and mottled, and the hair was long and stringy. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, and it filled me with a deep sense of dread. I knew I had to do something about the mirror, so I decided to board it up to seal it off from the rest of the world. But even with the mirror gone, the visions didn't stop there. Everywhere I looked, there was a reflective surface. Windows, car mirrors, even the surface of my phone screen. And in each one, I could glimpse the twisted figure staring back at me. It was like it was following me, haunting me. I couldn't take it anymore. I started to have public freakouts, seeing the twisted figure everywhere and screaming at it to leave me alone. People thought I was crazy, and I couldn't blame them. But I knew the truth. The horrors on the other side of the mirror were still after me. I could feel myself losing my sanity. I knew I had to find a way to stop this, to close the portal and banish the creatures back to where they came from. I knew I had to confront the mirror to finally put an end to my torment. So I unboarded the mirror and waited in front of it, determined to see the twisted figure once and for all. And then it happened. The thing manifested in the glass, and I saw it clearly for the first time. But what I saw was not a creature from another dimension, not a being from another world. It was something else entirely. The horror of the realization hit me like a freight train. The creature wasn't in the mirror. It never was. The mirror was never a gateway into another dimension. The thing I had been seeing was something that came from the back of my head. I watched in horror as the creature silently emerged through my skin, tearing its way out of my face. It began to writhe and twist. It looked around for a moment, as if it was taking in its surrounding. The atmosphere grew cold, and with slow deliberation, the thing slowly rested its eyes upon me. I could neither move nor scream. I couldn't take my gaze off it, nor quell the way it gripped my fears in a vice. Its lips suddenly stretched into what might have been a smile, an eerie expression full of knowing. It then burrowed back into my head, disappearing as if it had never been there. I was left standing there, my mind reeling from the horror of what had just occurred. For the first time, I noticed I could feel it inside me, wriggling and squirming, making its way deeper and deeper into my body. This all happened when I was younger. As I walked through the old, dusty house with my parents, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The open house tour had seemed like a fun idea at first, but now I just wanted to get out of there. The house was large and spacious, with high ceilings and dark corners. It was the kind of place that was perfect for hiding secrets. As we moved from room to room, my parents chatted excitedly about the potential of making an offer, but I couldn't really focus on anything they were saying. I wandered away from them, drawn to a dark hallway that was tucked away out of sight. As I walked down the hall, I found a door that I was sure hadn't been there when last I glanced over. I had circled around the place once already, and I was pretty sure that this door wasn't there before. It was old and faded, with peeling paint and a rusty doorknob. I reached out and touched the doorknob, feeling a chill run down my spine as my fingers wrapped around it, and I could almost feel the door itself trying to push me away, but I was determined to see what was behind it. I turned the knob and pushed, feeling the door creak open with a groan of protest. I stepped through the threshold and into the darkness beyond, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the walls closing in around me, suffocating and overwhelming. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me and spun around, but the door was gone, and I was trapped in the dark. And as I stood there, alone and terrified, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I realized that I was standing in the middle of a staircase. It was winding and narrow. It seemed to go further down than I could see, and the bottom was nowhere in sight. I felt a sense of fear and trepidation as I stared down the stairs. What was down there? The unknown can set your imaginations running wild, but I didn't have any other choice. The only way out was down. With a deep breath, I started to venture down the staircase. The steps were old and creaky, and they groaned beneath my feet. As I descended deeper and deeper, I felt a growing sense of unease. The staircase seemed to go on forever with no end in sight. I kept my hand on the wall, trying to steady myself as I walked. The longer I went on, and still without reaching the bottom, I couldn't help but feel that, though impossible as it may seem, this staircase stretched on infinitely, and that somehow I'd taken a step out of time, trapped in this continuous cycle of descending forever downwards. Panic sets in, and I tried sprinting forward, hoping against hope that I could outrun this nightmare. But no matter how long I ran, the bottom never materialized. I don't know how long I went on. Time seemed to lose all meaning in a place like this. I couldn't tell if I had been walking for minutes, hours, or even days. The only reference I had was the way my hands looked. When I stared down at them, they were no longer the hands of a young boy, but the wrinkled, gnarly hands of an old man. Have I really been down here for so long? It couldn't be possible, but feeling for my face, I felt the contours of a face ravaged by age. And then, without warning, the stairs ended. I stepped off the last step and into a room that felt very familiar to me, like something out of a distant dream. I was back in the house before I found the stairs. It looked exactly the same as it did the day I disappeared, as if no time had passed at all. A noise emerged from the other room, and I cautiously approached. As I peered around the corner, I saw my parents. They too were exactly the same as the day I went missing. I ran over to them and tried to embrace them, but they freaked out when they saw me. They stepped back, keeping me a fair distance away, and looked at me like I was some kind of stranger. And there it was. The reality of the situation hit me. Whatever happened to me on those stairs had left its mark on me, and they no longer recognized who I am. I don't know what happened to me in that dark, forgotten room. All I know is that I was lost for a long time, and when I finally found my way back, I was no longer the same person.
The snow is coming down so thick and fast that I can barely see more than a few feet in front of me. The wind is howling, slicing through my clothes like 1,000 tiny knives. I'm shivering uncontrollably, my teeth chattering so hard that my jaw feels like it's about to break. I wrapped my cloak tighter around my body, trying to keep out the cold. My feet were numb, my hands shaking. I had been walking for what felt like days, trying to find this village, to find these people that need my help. But now, my supplies were long gone, and I was starving. My strength was fading fast, my resolve faltering. As I wandered through the snow, I couldn't help but question my faith. I had devoted my life to serving God, but now I felt abandoned, alone in this frozen wasteland. My thoughts turned dark and bitter as the cold seeped into my bones, sapping my strength and will to live. I was starting to hallucinate, seeing things that couldn't possibly be real, things that I had tried so hard to forget. My faith was at its lowest ebb, and I began to wonder if there even was a God at all, or if it was all just a comforting lie I had told myself. I was lost, alone, and close to death, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly afraid. I had pushed myself too hard, and now I was paying the price. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I heard a strange whisper on the wind. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I turned in the direction of the sound, my eyes straining to see through the snow. I followed the sound, trudging through the knee-deep snow. It was hard to see through the blizzard, but I could just make out the outline of a village in the distance. Was this the village I had been looking for? I felt like I had been here before. Something familiar. The village seemed empty, with no signs of life. No lights or fires burning. But as I walked closer, I saw men, women, and children all standing out in the freezing cold. I approached them, trying to get their attention, but they didn't seem to notice me. They were mumbling strange words, their lips moving almost soundlessly in the cold. It was as if they were in a trance, their bodies frozen in place. I tried to move them, to shake them awake, but they were like statues, unyielding and unmoving. I continued through the town, the sense of unease growing inside me. The mumbling incantations followed me as I went, growing louder, a constant drone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Just ahead of me, I could see the ruins of a church. It looked like it had been burnt to the ground, and recently too. I approached the altar inside. What lay before me I could not make sense of. My head began to throb with an intense pain. Suddenly, the incantation stopped. Silence. I turned around and saw that the whole town had gathered behind me, their eyes fixed on me. But it wasn't me they were looking at. It was something beyond me, something unseen. I turned back around to face the altar, my heart racing, and saw the demon standing before me. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire. Its mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. And as I looked on in horror, it reached out a hand towards me, beckoning me closer, welcoming me home.
It's been 86 days since it all started. We thought it was due to climate change, but we couldn't be certain. The sky seemed to pulse and shimmer. We saw shapes in the clouds, twisted formations and intricate patterns. Crowds started gathering in the streets. The government tried to reassure everyone it was a natural occurrence and there was nothing to be worried about. They flew planes through the clouds to collect samples. But the planes never returned. Our cell phones stopped working, and our TV signals were interrupted. Some claimed that it was the result of an advanced military weapon. Others believed that it was extraterrestrial beings. On the 16th day, the city was shrouded in a heavy mist. We left our home and joined the masses walking to the center of the city. Families prepared themselves for the worst. We stood there hushed, staring up at the sky. Then suddenly, a deafening sound. Riots broke out. The city was devastated. We escaped the city, leaving our beloved home behind. With only a few of our possessions, we headed for a place far away. I pray that soon we will have found a safe place to call home.
Dr. Richard Bennett was a well-respected psychologist, often dealing with cases of sleep disorders. Among his myriad patients, there was one who seemed particularly troubled. His name was Thomas. He spoke of a man haunting his dreams, a man whose description made the hairs on the back of Dr. Bennett's neck stand. Thomas described him as a tall figure clad in a dark suit, face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat that cast a long, ominous shadow. Yet his eyes, they were impossible to miss. Bloodshot and glowing, they were filled with a malicious intent. like molten iron piercing through the cool darkness. These eyes didn't merely look, they burned, consuming every iota of hope, filling Thomas with an indescribable dread. The figure was always watching, always following. No matter how hard he tried to hide, the figure was always there, tormenting him with his silent, menacing presence. Thomas was so terrified that he'd forsaken sleep entirely, afraid to cross paths with the haunting figure in his dreams. Stumped on how to help Thomas, Dr. Bennett asked that he return again soon for another appointment. 2 weeks passed with no word from Thomas. Dr. Bennett grew concerned. He requested his secretary to call Thomas, but someone else answered his number. The news that returned sent shockwaves through the clinic. Thomas had fallen from a high-rise building, an apparent suicide. Haunted by Thomas's case and grappling with guilt, Dr. Bennett decided to investigate. He delved into the labyrinth of online forums late into the night, searching for any other experiences similar to Thomas, where someone was so afraid of their dreams that they could not go to sleep. His search led him to various forums where he stumbled upon multiple accounts of people describing reoccurring nightmares where they're being watched by a haunting figure. Each description of the man made Dr. Bennett shiver. They were all describing the same man that Thomas saw, a man with a long-brimmed hat that could not hide his glowing, menacing eyes. With a sinking feeling, Dr. Bennett dug deeper. The more he uncovered, the more his dread grew. He traced the identity of the people who made these posts. Each individual who had reported seeing this figure had died mysteriously, all from falls from great heights. Exhausted from his research, he fell asleep at his desk. In his dream, however, he noticed immediately that something was very wrong. His breath quickened. He clutched at his heart. A pressure was stabbing at his chest. He felt like he was about to explode. He turned around and found himself in the presence of a tall, shadowy man. His menacing eyes bored into Dr. Bennett's soul, the same fiery gaze Thomas had described. It was a horrific sensation, like being skewered by pure malevolence. Richard tried to run, the man always a step behind. He rushed through the maddening dreamscape, through long, dark corridors that seemed to twist and turn into themselves. He could feel the man's gaze relentlessly boring into his back. He jumped through one of the doors, slamming it closed behind him, only to find the man was already waiting for him in the room. Bolting back into the corridor, Dr. Bennett kept running, screaming for help. Suddenly he saw it, a beam of light at the end of the corridor, a way out. His heart pounded as he made a mad dash for it, the freedom it promised propelling him forward. But as he climbed through the window-like opening, his heart sank. There was no ground beneath him, just an abyss. His body was falling, the wind whooshing past his ears. He woke with a start, finding himself not in his bed, but climbing through his apartment's window. Disoriented and terrified, Richard realized he was sleepwalking, emulating his dream. But it was too late. His body had already tipped over the edge. As the ground rushed up to meet him, the last thing Dr. Bennett saw was of the man's terrifying eyes, still burning into his soul, even as he fell to his death.
Hey, Grandma? Grandma, I think someone's at the door. Oh my God, can she even hear me? I swear to God. All right, I'm going back to my game. Whoever the hell is at the door, just ignore them.
Peter, what the hell is going on in here? Those monsters are everywhere.
I don't have a clue. What is this place? It looks like some big old mansion house. It gives me the creeps.
Have you seen Roger? Where the hell did he go? What the hell was that?
I will go have a look. You stay here. Be careful now. I hope Roger is okay.
Be careful. Those things are everywhere.
Grandma? Is everything okay? Did you fall over again? Just give me a shout if you need some help, okay, Grandma?
Peter, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, but we need to get out of here. This place is a madhouse. We are going to end up like minced meat.
You're right. Let's figure out how to get out of here.
All right, let's go. We should be able to get out this way, down the stairs.
Watch out! One of them is coming up the stairs.
Stand back!
There's more of them coming this way.
Quickly, through here. Okay, we should be safe in here. It seems the whole place is overrun. Those horrible monsters, they must have got Roger.
What the hell has caused all of this? I wonder if the entire city has been overrun. Every street, hospital, and in every house.
I think you may be right. We have to surviving and getting through this madness.
I've always been a night owl, preferring the quiet and darkness to the chaos of the day. My friends would often poke fun of me, calling me a vampire or a creature of the night. They never understood the allure of nighttime, the way the darkness wrapped around you like a cloak, hiding you from the world. But as much as I loved the night, there was one walk home that will forever haunt me. It was late, around 2 a.m, and I had just left my friend's house after a night of gaming and laughter. The streets were empty, lit only by the dim glow of the streetlights and the crescent moon above. The air was crisp, a biting chill that hinted at the coming winter. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and started my familiar walk home. As I turned the corner, I noticed something strange at the end of the street. A woman dressed in a tattered dress stood beneath a flickering streetlight. I could see her breath in the cold air, but she seemed unfazed by the temperature. She was swaying slowly, her movements almost hypnotic. Curiosity piqued. I continued walking, unable to tear my eyes away from the figure. As I grew closer, I realized she wasn't just swaying, but dancing. Her movements were graceful, a haunting dance that sent shivers down my spine. I was entranced, unable to comprehend the bizarre scene before me. I stopped a few feet away from her, my breath catching in my throat. She didn't seem to notice me, lost in her ghostly waltz. Suddenly, the streetlight above her flickered and died, plunging her in darkness. The sudden change snapped me out of my trance, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The woman stopped dancing and slowly lifted her head. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. Her face, once hidden by the darkness, was a pale, twisted visage of terror. Her eyes were filled with hate, and her mouth was lined with rows of jagged teeth. She let out a guttural, inhuman scream and began to move towards me with unnatural speed. I turned and ran, the sound of her screeching laughter echoing in my ears. My heart pounded in my chest as I sprinted through the dark street, desperately praying she wouldn't catch me. I dared not look back, the fear of seeing her twisted face only a few steps behind me, too much to bear. Finally, I reached my house, fumbling with my keys as my hands shook with terror. I slammed the door shut behind me collapsing against it, gasping for breath. The silence of my house provided little comfort as the memory of the woman and her haunting dance filled my mind. I never walk home alone at night anymore. The fear of encountering her again is too great. I don't know what she was or where she came from, but I do know one thing. She's still out there, waiting for her next victim to be lured in by her hypnotic dance. And if you ever see her, don't stop, don't stare, just run and pray that she doesn't catch you.
Becky had always wanted a Barbie doll. On her 10th birthday, her wish finally came true. The Barbie was immaculate, boasting a shiny head of golden hair and a body too slim to be true. A perfect plastic idol, she was an innocent girl's dream come true, the best friend for a lonely little girl, or so it seemed. As Becky got older, she became self-conscious about her body. The world around her, filled with impossible standards of beauty, didn't help her insecurities. She looked at the Barbie doll on her shelf with envy, wondering out loud, if only I had a thin waist and long legs like you, my life would be the better for it. That night, as Becky tried to drift off to sleep, she began hearing faint whispers.
Becky, darling, you're beautiful, but wouldn't it be better if you were as thin as me?
Becky groggily turned to find the source of the whisper. There was no one else in her room, but the Barbie doll was positioned prominently on her shelf. Was it coming from her?
Don't worry, Becky. You'll be happy once you're like me. I'll help you achieve the perfect body. After all, I'm your best friend.
The next morning, Becky found a shocking surprise. Her bedroom was filled with fashion magazines, each page open to portray ultra-thin models and the latest diets. She would open her wardrobe to find her comfortable clothes replaced with outfits that were too small, as if suggesting she should lose weight. Confusion turned to shock when she heard her parents shouting from the kitchen. Running down the stairs, Becky soon discovered that all the food in the house had been discarded. Her parents were livid, blaming her for the strange events. Suddenly recalling her dream of the whispers coming from the Barbie doll, Becky realized perhaps it wasn't a dream at all. It would explain the strange situation that she's experiencing. When she tried to tell her parents, they dismissed it as a pathetic excuse to dodge responsibility for her prank. Becky was grounded, and the eye of the doll seemed to glint with satisfaction. When night came, Becky woke up to a searing pain on her abdomen. On her bed, she found a tight corset fastened onto her, its strings pulled to the point of suffocation. She looked up in terror to see the Barbie standing at the foot of her bed, its plastic eyes void of empathy.
Becky, dear, you need to take losing weight more seriously. Don't you want to be liked by everyone?
Enraged, Becky ripped off her corset. She seized the doll and hurled it out the window. Days passed, and life seemingly returned to normal. Becky awoke each morning to the comforting aroma of breakfast. Her clothes fit snugly, and her parents' scowls were replaced by their usual warm smiles. She found herself laughing more, her sunny disposition brightening the household. As the memory of the whispering doll faded, she started doubting her own recollections. Had she merely imagined the voice, the grotesque suggestions? Her mind wrestled with the logic of it all. It was a Barbie doll, after all, an inanimate piece of plastic. As she drifted through the everyday routine, a sense of unease still lurked at the back of her mind, but with each passing moment, the horrifying memory of her supposed interactions with the doll started to feel more and more like a bad dream. But things changed that very night. Becky awoke with a start to find herself gagged and bound to her bed. In the dim moonlight, she saw the silhouette of the Barbie doll she'd discarded days before. Now disheveled and grimy from days neglected outside, the doll stood over her, its plastic eyes gleaming with a chilling determination.
Becky, I made a promise to help you become as beautiful as me, and I'm going to see it through.
The doll held up a tiny, sharp knife, glinting ominously under the moonlight. As Becky's eyes widened in terror, the doll reassured her.
Don't worry, I'm Surgeon Barbie.
With a surgeon's precision, the doll began to carve, removing chunks of flesh from Becky, slowly peeling away Becky's body parts until they were slender. As she writhed and screamed into her gag, the doll chided her, her tone as sweet as a lullaby.
Don't grimace, darling. It's not a pretty sight. You should smile more. But don't worry, I can fix that for you.
The following morning was a school day. The corridors hummed with the usual pre-class chatter and laughter. Suddenly, the jovial buzz faded into a chilling silence as a skeletal figure made its way through the crowd. The kids gawked in disbelief and terror as they recognized the figure. It was Becky, or what was left of her. Gone was the vibrant, bubbly girl they knew, replaced by a haunting apparition. Becky was now unnaturally thin, her body echoing the doll's impossible proportions. Her clothes hung off her like drapes on a coat hanger, her complexion pale as death. But what sent chills down their spines was her face. A gruesome, permanent smile had been crudely stapled onto her face, mirroring the Barbie doll's constant grin. Her eyes, once full of life and innocence, were now empty and glassy. A wave of terror washed over the school as the true extent of Becky's transformation dawned on them. They watched in horror as this grotesque version of their friend continued her strut down the corridor, her stapled smile a grim testament to the nightmarish ordeal she had endured.
Something strange happened last night. Maybe it was because of the foxes crying outside, but I couldn't sleep. I just laid there listening to the high-pitched wails. Who could have imagined animals could sound so disturbing? Eventually they fell silent, and I thought I could finally catch some rest. But then something else kept me awake. I thought I heard something inside the house. Actually, I felt it more than anything, I think. Anyway, since I also needed the toilet, I got up to have a look around. My eyes didn't adjust to the dark yet when I stepped out of my bedroom, but I suddenly felt compelled to take a photo of the darkness.
One night, I came home to find something out of the ordinary. A door left opened, not the way I left it. A room, unrecognizable from what should be my living room. The police arrived hours later. They searched inside to make sure it was secure while I waited out in the cold. The burglars made their escape long before I came home. They did a good job turning each room upside down. There were markings on the frame of the back door. They told me that's how they got in. Forensics did a brief scrape for evidence. They found nothing. They told me there wasn't much else they could do for me. Before leaving, the police asked me to document anything that went missing. That promised to be a long process. That night, I slept in the ruins of my bedroom with an unfriendly feeling. A knowing that someone uninvited has been in my house. They stood in this space, loomed over my bed, ransacked through my belongings, violated my privacy. My safe place was no longer mine. I lay sleeplessly in my bed. The ceiling stared back at me. In the wakeful silence of the night, my mind wandered, and I recreated in my mind the sounds of the stranger inside my house. I heard them ripping open my drawers, sneaking over the creaky floorboards, smashing open the locks and forcing their way in. The following morning, I tidied up the wreckage and tried to give the place a sense of normality. I tried accounting for any of the missing properties. The odd thing was that after all the effort breaking and entering, not a single object was misplaced. I spoke with the neighbors, hoping they have seen something I did not.
Don't remember seeing anything. I was out most of the day, though there is a new postman in the neighborhood.
Your place was broken into once back when an old lady lived there. She was a bit of a recluse, but I always got the impression she didn't sleep. Her eyes were always so red.
Someone did knock on my door yesterday, some salesperson. I turned him away and he moved on to the other houses down there. He was smoking at the same time, struck me as unprofessional.
At night, sleep still didn't come easy. Eventually, my mind would always wander to dark thoughts. I tried to picture the stranger in my room, imagining them standing over me as I slept, and the darkness yet again came to life. I could feel the unwanted presence in the air. Electricity tingles down my spine. I could hear the noise they made rumbling downstairs. Careful footsteps trying to evade listening ears. If I should open my eyes, would I see someone there? A figure standing in the corner watching over me. And if I should shout, would anybody come to save me? I dared not risk it. I kept my eyes shut, but sleep still escaped me. Feeling at a loss and with my throat running dry, I decided to get up for a drink. Was that always there? Did I leave that bottle out? It's not like me to do so. I've been feeling so paranoid these days. I'm seeing oddities in my unconscious behavior. I must have forgotten to put that bottle away, my mind obviously preoccupied by other matters, but still something didn't feel right. Something has been eating away at me, an unease that stuck with me since the police left me. Where could this anxiety stem from? I retraced the events. There must have been something I missed, something we all missed. The front door was wide open when I came home. The marks on the back door. Did it look like they were made by claws? No, it can't be. So what was wrong?
Wait. Oh God. How have I only just realized this?
When the police said they checked every room of the house, there was one room they didn't think to look inside. Oh my God. Something creaked in the attic above. I can't believe I'm doing this. The hairs at the back of my neck stood on ends. I have no idea what was up there, but I knew I had to look. I summoned all the courage I had as I poked my head through the attic door to find nothing. There was nothing there, only darkness. I looked the place over again. It really was empty. Maybe I was being too paranoid about this. I have been losing sleep after all. The noise I heard earlier must have been rats scurrying about. Scanning the attic once more reassured me that I had nothing to fear. I wasn't sure what I was even expecting to find anyway. It made no sense for a burglar to hide out here. It was a stupid thought. Standing here now, I can't believe I even bothered to check the attic. One thing's for sure, I need a good sleep. Now I definitely heard that. In that instant, time stood still. A million thoughts raced through my mind. My senses heightened like an out-of-body experience. And I became aware of two things. The utter fear I felt standing there, and those bloodshot eyes.
Let's start from the beginning. Mr. Mitchell, how long had you been working at the facility before the incident?
Barely 3 weeks. I was the new guy, still figuring things out, getting to know the maze of the facility. The secrecy surrounding the project was stifling. I wasn't even told exactly what we were guarding.
What were you told about SCP-173?
On my first day, they handed me this packet. Inside were protocols for different SCPs. SCP-173's was the thickest. It said to maintain direct eye contact at all times and never blink. The thing was unable to move if at least one person was observing it. Allowing it to move would be fatal. I remember laughing. It sounded like some sort of prank they played on the newbies.
But then you saw the footage.
Yeah, during one of my training sessions, they showed us archival videos. Most were mundane, routine checks and such. But then there was this one. You could see guards, veterans by the looks of them, surrounding SCP-173, eyes fixed on it. One of them blinked just for a fraction of a second. That was all it took. The aftermath was, it was like nothing I'd ever seen. That's when the gravity of what we were dealing with hit me.
Fast forward to the night of the containment breach. What happened that night?
Everything was normal, another dull night. Then, out of nowhere, the alarms went off. Red lights, blaring sirens, the works. The voice over the intercom was urgent, almost panicked. Containment breach of SCP-173. My heart sank. Every horror I had seen in that footage rushed back. And the worst part, I was stationed near its containment area.
What did you do?
Panic set in. Protocol dictated that we establish visual contact immediately. I set out with 2 other guards, Thompson and Rodriguez.
Were they familiar with SCP-173?
More than I was. Thompson had been there for over 5 years, Rodriguez for 3. They'd trained, practiced, even drilled for situations like this, but never actually experienced one. We rushed towards the containment room. That's where we heard it, a scraping sound, like cement grinding against the floor. Each step felt like an eternity. The noise grew louder, echoing through the corridors, playing tricks on my mind. I reached an intersection, took a deep breath, and shone my flashlight down one of the hallways. Nothing. We proceeded cautiously, flashlights darting in every direction, trying to cover as much ground as possible, while also trying to keep SCP-173 in sight. But the damn thing, it's unnaturally fast and deceptive. One moment, it's there in the corner of your eye. Blink, and it's somewhere else.
And the encounter?
It was swift, and it was brutal. We found ourselves in a larger chamber, probably an old storage area. The room had multiple exits, which meant more chances for SCP-173 to slip in or out. Thompson was the first to spot it directly across the room. We all fixed our gaze on it, but then Rodriguez's flashlight flickered and went out. He cursed, smacking it to get it to work again. But that momentary distraction was all it took. SCP-173 appeared right behind him. We heard a snap, and Rodriguez went down. Thompson and I kept our eyes glued to SCP-173, inching back towards the door. But it was like it knew that we were vulnerable. Thompson was next. He whispered to me to keep looking at it while he retrieved a backup light from his belt. But the second his gaze shifted, SCP-173 was on. Now it was just me and that thing. I was certain that was the end. My eyes burned from keeping them open for so long. My body shook with fear. Any second, I was sure I would blink, and that would be it. As I felt the water streaming down my face, and the burning in my eyes intensified, something unexpected happened. SCP-173 moved.
What?
I know it shouldn't be possible. What I saw went against everything I was told about SCP-173. It slowly arched its head, leaned forward, and moved closer to me. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but I was paralyzed with fear. As it approached, it made a sound. Not quite a growl, not a whisper, but a low, guttural noise. It leaned in, its painted face inches from mine, the sound getting louder. It tilted its head as if examining me, or maybe hearing something I couldn't. It felt like it was seeing into my soul. It was terrible. Overwhelmed, I cowered, covering my face with my arms, waiting for the inevitable. Moments felt like hours. When I finally dared to look, it was gone.
Mr. Mitchell, I need to inform you of something. We've thoroughly reviewed the surveillance footage from that night. According to the tapes, SCP-173 did not, in fact, move while you were maintaining eye contact with it. The tapes show it remained perfectly still until you covered your face.
I'm telling you, I saw it move. This wasn't a figment of my imagination. It moved. I'm sure of it.
Why do you think it spared you?
I wish I knew. Did it have some sort of twisted sense of mercy? Did it understand fear? Or perhaps there's some other force at play, one that even SCP-173 respects her fears. Whatever the reason, it left an indelible mark on me. Every blink, every moment of darkness feels like a potential end. Why did it let me go? And will it be so merciful next time?
What did you do after the incident?
I've taken some time off. I needed to reflect on things, find some semblance of peace after what I saw. The facility offered counseling, but no therapy can erase what's etched in your memory.
And how do you spend your days now?
I've taken up a new hobby. It's the only thing that seems to take my mind off that night, even if it's just for a little while. I started sculpting. There's something therapeutic about molding and shaping, controlling the medium when you feel everything else is out of control.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Mitchell. We'll be in touch again soon.
There's one truth in the world. It's that beauty is power. And I happen to be the prettiest girl in school. Everywhere I go, I feel all eyes on me. Guys want to be with me, and girls want to be me. Every day I am reminded that the world revolves around those with looks. People might not always admit it, but deep down they all know it's true. Beauty opens doors, and I've been able to experience things that others could only dream of. Being beautiful is everything to me, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mary enters the bathroom to touch up her makeup. The empty room offered a brief reprieve from all the attention she's been getting. She stood in front of the mirror, admiring her own beauty. As she examined her face, there was something amiss. She noticed a small blemish on her otherwise perfect skin. She leaned in closer for a better look and saw that it was a pimple.
Outrageous!
Mary couldn't believe that something so hideous could mar her perfect complexion. She reached out to squish the spot, but as she did, it screamed. Mary was taken aback. Surely the spot didn't just make a sound, did it? She looked again and saw something that defied reason. For a moment, she thought she must have been dreaming, but it was unmistakable that the spot had a face of its own. It was a tiny, grotesque thing that wore a leery smile. The face began to sing a mocking rhyme.
Pretty Mary, so fair, so bright, but her skin's not perfect, try as she might. A spot on her face, oh what a sight, but there's nothing she can do to make it right.
Mary was horrified.
What is this? Disgusting!
She pressed against the pimple in an attempt to squish it from her face. It giggled as it tried to resist the pressure. The gleeful sound sent chills down Mary's spine, but she continued to push on hard. Finally, with a satisfying pop, Mary squished the creature for good. She wiped the remains off her hand and quickly left the bathroom. As the teacher droned on about the day's lesson, Mary's mind wandered back to the horrifying thing she had seen in the bathroom.
I must be tripping or something. This kind of thing just doesn't happen. Maybe someone slipped something into my drink when I wasn't looking. That must be it. Clearly someone is jealous of me and decided to play this prank to make me look bad. Well, they won't be getting the better of me. Once the effect wear off, I'll make them pay.
Mary's musing was interrupted when the teacher called for everyone's attention. He was introducing a new student joining their class. The girl stood up and introduced herself as Emily, a transfer student that was new in town. Mary noticed that she too is quite pretty, and she could feel the excitement from the boys around her. As Emily spoke, Mary's attention was caught by another classmate who was signaling to her, pointing to her face.
You have something on your face.
Mary flipped open her pocket mirror to inspect it and saw another spot on her face. It was a shocking discovery. As she inspected closer, the spot wiggled, and just like the first incident, a face pushed its way out from under the paws. But this time, she noticed something else unsettling about the spot. Not only did it have a face, but it shared a resemblance to the new student, Emily. She tried to hide her surprise and suppress a scream. The spot resembling Emily began to sing a creepy rhyme.
Pretty Mary, once so fair, your beauty was beyond compare. But now a spot has come to light, and tarnished all your radiance bright.
Mary was just as horrified by the imperfection on her skin as finding a tiny face attached to her. It was inconceivable that someone of her stature could be blighted by such a hideous mark. She discreetly tried to squish the spot, hoping no one would notice. Gradually, Mary applied more force on the pimple, but it just squealed in the light. Anxious about drawing attention to her, Mary kept on squeezing.
Almost there. Keep going.
Mary dug her thumbs deep into the spot. It burst open, but as it did, something terrible happened. The head of the new student, Emily, suddenly exploded. Gore shot everywhere and splattered all over the room. The class erupted in chaos, with students screaming and running for the door. Sat frozen in her seat, Mary was unable to move nor comprehend what just happened.
It must have been a coincidence, right?
The horrific revelation hit her. Somehow, popping the pimple on her face also led to the same fate for those the spot resembled. Sitting in her room, Mary couldn't get the day's event out of her head. She just continued to stare at her own reflection in the mirror. The horror of what happened weighed heavy on her, and she felt a bit of responsibility for what happened to Emily.
What happened to Emily? Was it my fault? But I didn't do anything. Cleaning my face isn't a crime. People do it all the time. There's no way that can be connected to what happened today. Even so, my beauty is important, and I have to do everything to keep myself perfect. Life isn't worth living if I am not.
As she finished the thought, she heard a soft popping sound prickle close to her ear. Her eyes flicked quickly to the mirror, and her worst fears were realized. More and more pops erupted around her, and in the blink of an eye, Mary's beautiful face was suddenly crowded out by a dozen tiny faces, all grinning gleefully at her. More disturbingly, though, is the realization that they all resembled her classmates. All of them were there. They all erupted in a chorus.
Your beauty once a shining star, now tarnished by those spots bizarre. No one wants to look your way. Your once bright light has gone astray.
Mary was paralyzed by what she should do. The faces were all of her classmates. Popping them would surely result in all her friends consigned to the same fate as Emily. On the other hand, could she live with such a wretched face? She had always been beautiful. Was that sacrifice worth it?
No, I can never be the ugly one.
In a frenzy, Mary began to pop all the spots. She didn't care about the consequences. She just wanted to be beautiful. One by one, each pimple burst open, their pus splattering against the mirror. Mary's mind was made up. The next day, Mary returned to school, with her beautiful face back to what it was before. Everyone resumed glancing at her in the halls, and complimented her as she passed. She basked in the glow of their attention.
How wonderful to be back to my perfect self again. Normally, all these hangers-on would have annoyed me. I never thought I'd be so happy with them clinging onto me like this.
She settled into her seat, ready for class to begin, but she noticed that no one else had turned up. There was an eerie silence about the once lively room, but Mary tried to tell herself that everyone was just running late or ill. At that moment, Mary then noticed a quiet voice calling to her.
Mary. Mary.
She looked down, and to her horror, she saw a new spot emerge on her face.
No, it can't.
The spot grinned at her. This time, the spot resembled Mary herself. Her face was the prettiest of all the ones that came before, yet filled her with the most dread. It taunted her.
Oh, Mary, dear Mary, so vain, so vain. You'll do anything to rid your face of that stain. You'll pop and you'll squeeze with all your might, just to keep your face shining bright. But oh, how the tables have turned. Your looks, once so envied, now scorned. You'll go to great lengths to keep your face, but now it's all just a futile race.
Mary felt trapped and hesitated about her next move.
What do I do? I can't go through with it. Everything that I ever wanted will be gone with a face like this.
The spot resembling Mary was crackling with excitement. It relished the turmoil that was showing on its host. Mary lifted her hand slowly to the boil and pressed a finger to it. She pushed against it with agonizing pain. A loud explosion echoed down the empty room, followed by a deafening silence. These walls have once seen a beauty so rare, now houses a story of a perfect nightmare.
I met someone on Tinder. His name was Thomas, good-looking with a quirky sense of humor. He stated his profession was an artist, which piqued my interest. After a few days of lighthearted banter, he asked me out for drinks. Excitedly, I agreed. The bar was crowded, filled with the laughter and chatter of people looking to unwind after a long day. Amidst them, Thomas stood out. He was charming and witty, his dark humor blending seamlessly with his tales of being an artist. He was very complimentary and gushed about how he adored my hands. I admit I was a little stricken by his charms. As the night progressed, he asked if I would like to see his artwork. Intrigued and admittedly a bit tipsy, I agreed. His apartment, he assured me, was a few blocks away. Thomas's apartment was a walk-up in an older building with creaky stairs and an antique charm. As he unlocked the door, he jokingly mentioned rumors of the building being haunted. We laughed it off then. Once inside, I found myself in a macabre museum. His art was taxidermy, and he had specimens ranging from foxes to birds, all eerily lifelike. It was unsettling, yet I couldn't deny the skill he had. Excusing himself to another room to prepare for the grand tour, he left me to peruse his collection. I took my time inspecting each pieces. Animals in all shapes and sizes adorned the room: a fox in mid-prowl, a hawk in mid-flight, a rabbit frozen in fear. Each piece was immaculate, capturing a singular, eternal moment of life. As I looked closer, my initial admiration gradually turned to unease as I noticed the details. The rabbit's eyes, too human-like, the fox's teeth, eerily similar to my own. In the corner, hidden under an old sheet, was a larger shape, perhaps an artwork not yet finished. My curiosity overcoming my unease, I decided to take a peek. What I discovered under the sheet made me cry out in terror. It was a monstrous abomination, a chimera made up of various creatures with elements unmistakably, horrifyingly human. Its human head set atop a lion's body, its eyes wide open in an eternal scream as a beak emerges from its mouth, and human hands jutted out from its back. It was a vile mockery of nature. Suddenly, the echo of a chainsaw from another room sliced through my panic. A cold wave of terror washed over me. The whirring sound grew louder as Thomas's voice trickled in from the other room. I needed to escape. I sprinted toward the door as the chainsaw roared louder. Thomas emerged from the other room, his face twisted into an eerie grin. The chainsaw in his hand made my blood run cold. The way to the door felt like running a gauntlet. I unlocked the door as fast as I could as Thomas ran up behind me. I barely made it out the door, dashed out of the apartment, and into the night. The taste of freedom never so sweet. I've since deleted Tinder. Who knows how dangerously close I was to being added to that monstrous creation in his apartment. But the experience has forever changed me. Everywhere I go, I always glance over my shoulder. Every shadow, every noise in the night holds the possibility that a predator is out there, hiding, waiting for me.
I was jolted awake by my brother Harry's shaking hand on my shoulder. "Wake up," he whispered urgently. "I found something outside that you need to see." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and followed him out the door and into the garden. There, in the middle of the yard, was a large hole in the ground. It was deep, with craggy edges, and a darkness that seemed to swallow up all the light that dared venture near it. The sight of it sent shivers down my spine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of unease. My brother, on the other hand, was beside himself with excitement. "Can you believe it? It wasn't here earlier," he exclaimed. He proceeded to throw rocks down the hole to see how deep it went, all the while cackling to himself, but we never heard the rocks hitting the bottom. I tugged on his sleeve, pleading for him to return inside the house. Despite my protest, he bent closer to the hole as if listening to a distant sound. He turned to me and said, "It's Mum and Dad. They're both down there." I stood by him and listened intently, but heard nothing. At this point, I was starting to worry about Harry. I threatened to go back inside the house and leave him alone if he didn't follow, but he was adamant about what he had heard. "They're down there," he said with a huge grin. "Mum and Dad, they're both calling for us to go down. There's something amazing they want to show us." And without any warning, he started to climb down the hole, eager to see what the voices had promised him. I ran back inside the house, too frightened to be part of any of this. As I passed my parents' room, however, I couldn't resist taking a look inside. To my shock, I found them both fast asleep in their bed, and the realization of the danger my brother was in hit me. Who was Harry talking to down the hole? I raced back outside to warn my brother of my discovery, but when I reached the outside, I was met with a new kind of horror. The hole was gone, vanished without any trace. Years have passed since that night, but I still relive the moment of my brother's disappearance. Sometimes, when I'm walking alone at night, I'll see a hole and hear a voice calling out from it. It was Harry's voice, beckoning me to join him in the darkness. It would whisper to me, "Come join me. You have to see what's down here."